Started. Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Women's Maximum Fitness Podcast. Today, I have a very special guest with me, IFBB Pro, Jamie Pinder. How you doing, Jamie?
I am doing awesome. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Yeah, I'm super excited today because we are going to go over Jamie's history, a little bit of how she got into bodybuilding, and then we are going to talk about drugs, steroids, performance enhancing drugs in the bodybuilding industry with females, which we were just saying prior to this is a very taboo topic, but something that I feel is super important for beginning competitors and people that are even in the mix of competing to know what they're getting into, what their options are. We're going to talk about some of the myths, the side effects, and just the different levels, what women should be taking, shouldn't be taking, and if it's even safe at all. So Jamie, let's get started a little bit and talk about just what got you into bodybuilding.
So I was actually a really bad alcoholic, and I used to drink like a handle of Captain Morgan every night. I smoked 2 packs of cigarettes every day. I was working in construction. And one day I just woke up and I didn't like the person that I saw in the mirror anymore. So I decided I was going to quit smoking. I was going to quit drinking. I did both of them cold turkey. And so, you know, when you're an alcoholic and you spend all of your time at the bar every night, like literally I was there every single night. You kind of have all this free time. And I was like, okay, I was like skinny fat at the time. And I was like, okay, I have all this extra time. What am I going to do? I started going to the gym. And I fell in love with weight training. I just loved it. So I ended up meeting a competitor at the gym. I went to her first show and helped her backstage. And when I was in the audience, and it was Team U, it was the first Team U where they had bikini. They were giving pro cards for bikini. And I remember watching, there was no women's physique back then. It was just figure, bikinis first year, and I think women's bodybuilding was still around back then. And so I saw the figure girls on stage, and I was like, oh, that is what I want to do. I'm like, that is what I'm gonna do now with my time. So that's when I caught the bug, was first seeing those figure women on stage. And you know, I started going to Powerhouse Gym in New Haven, and that's a very big bodybuilding gym. It became my home gym. And from there, I actually started in bikini, believe it or not.
I know I've seen these pictures of you, and the transformation is incredible. What year was that you first competed in bikini?
So my first year in bikini was like 2008 or 2009. And I did terrible. I was awful. I got last place at all my shows. Like, I'm one of those girls that like, it was either work boots or sneakers. So for me to throw on a pair of heels and then be on stage in heels was hilarious. I have the video somewhere. I've got to find it and post it on Instagram because it's like a giraffe in ice skates. So, the good thing was, like, I did really pour in all those bikini shows. And I'm happy that I did, because it made me work that much harder. Because when I competed that first year in bikini, I told people, I'm like, I'm going to be an Olympian. I'm going to be on that Olympia stage. And people would laugh at me. They're like, oh, Jamie, oh, you're so silly. That's never going to happen. Don't even try. So, you know, after failing miserably in bikini, Women's Physique came out that last year that I was in bikini. Okay. And once I saw they had no heels, they were actually posing, they had posing routines. I fell in love with that division. I was like, next time I step on stage, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to skip right over figure, and I'm going right to Women's Physique. And when I decided to do that, I wanted to be one of the first pros. And I wanted to be one of the women that helped define what that division was going to be. Because with any new division, you've got kind of a couple years when it's new to kind of help define what's going to be what they're looking for. So I was, you know, my goal I ended up doing nationals in 2012. So I did the New England's in Boston. That's where I won my first Women's Physique show. 2 weeks later, I went to nationals and won my pro card. And then months after that, I went to my first pro show, the Chicago Pro, won that. So I won my pro debut. And then I ended up in the very first women's physique Olympia, which was one of my goals when I first turned pro, was like, I want to be in that first Olympia. So I was able to do that. I bombed at that show too, but it was still great to be part of that experience, you know, to go down in history as being one of the first in that division. And then I went on to go compete. I competed 3 times in the Olympia after that. I won the Chicago Pro 2 more times. And then in 2017, after the Olympia, I got very badly injured and I have not competed since then. So my mission now really is to help other women. And this, you know, what we're going to talk about today is really educating women on anabolics and, you know, the benefits and the harm in it.
So I know I was looking at your competition history and I was noticing that. So what was well, first of all, if anyone has seen your transformation, this is when you were, can I say who you were working with at the time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so you were working with Shelby, and it's funny because I know Shelby pretty well. Like, I've trained with him, and he was one of the first people I connected with because he's here in Michigan with me.
Yeah.
And I remember messaging him and I was like, because it was like a year and a half. You went from like squishy to like this rock hard Olympian, you know? And I was like, is she natural? I remember I said, which is like what I was talking to you about, that women who first get into this look at other women and they think, I want to look like that. If I just work hard enough, I can look like that. And they do not think about the PEDs that are involved in the process.
Right. And I very much had that same kind of train of thought. When I first started competing in bikini, I didn't even know what anabolics really were at all. And I didn't back when I was in bikini, I still really like admired the girls who were more like the bigger figure girls.
Yeah.
So back then, Larissa Reese was one of the bigger figure girls, and she was my idol. I wanted to look just like her. And I remember, like, at that time, I was dating a bodybuilder who had been in bodybuilding for like 10 years already. And I asked him, you know, luckily, like, I had him as reference. So I was like, this is what I want to look like. And he's like, I'm going to be really honest with you. He's like, you're not going to be able to do that naturally. Right. And so I was lucky because by the time I was kind of done with bikini, I kind of already had that knowledge that, okay, if I want to go further than this, it's going to take something else. And he was pretty well versed in what was acceptable and good for women and what wasn't. So, and he really, the first time I did a cycle was when I made that transition from bikini to women's physique. Those were also probably my most aggressive cycles. I've never was quite as aggressive moving forward, because you realize you don't need that much. But you know, one good thing about being with him was he actually made me like write down a list of like, okay, why do I want to take Anavar? You know, he made me really like, okay, what sides am I okay with? What sides am I not okay with? And he made me really think about it. And he's like, I want you to do research he made me do research for a certain amount of time on my own. So he kind of made me do what I make most of my clients do now when they want to take that step. Because he wasn't just going to be a drug dealer where he's like, here, just take this and take this. So I do owe a lot of me being able to conserve my femininity to that relationship, because he really did help me with that. Because as we were talking before, this topic is so taboo. You can even try and talk to other female competitors and they're going to be very apprehensive talking to you about it. And they probably won't tell you the truth. Right. And I see this even with like women that I've been friends with for 10 years now. They still don't want to talk about it. And even if they do, they're usually not telling you the truth. Right. You know, so I feel like the guys don't have that kind of issue. They don't have that problem, because this is what happened with men. men started using anabolics and they had all the forums. So the forums aren't quite as popular now as they were before, like Instagram and Facebook and stuff. But back in the day when, men kind of really started getting into it, they were open about what they were using, what the sides were, how much they were using. They would make forums where they would post their whole cycles. They would post their blood work after, they would post their blood. So they had years and years and years of content from other men who actually were using these things. And a lot of feedback, because unfortunately with all of these anabolics and PEDs, you don't have scientific studies. Right. You don't have those things. So a lot of the kind of like the cycles and information that men have, they've been talking to each other forever. Where us women, even when you go on the forums that are more towards women in bodybuilding, like I know there used to be Sioux Country back in the day. I don't know if you remember that, but that was a really popular one. But even those forums, they didn't really talk, like women really weren't that open about it. And even if you go on like RX Muscle, they have a women's section. It's like dead in there. It's like crickets. So
like, I mean, I listen to podcasts all the time, and the guys, they'll have like Fuad will have guys on and they just, let's talk about your drug cycle, or they'll have specific episodes that are geared towards talking about cycles. And, I feel like there is a lot of benefit to that. There's also the detriment of people really focus on the drugs, and I think especially nowadays, people focus on the drugs so much that they don't focus nearly as much on the nutrition and the training, because you don't see these guys. Like I've known guys who were at my gym who were, taking using different steroids, and it's like, but they don't train hard at all because they're relying on, it's like you're using more steroids than the people I know who use steroids, who train really hard, and they have, it's like you don't really get anything from just taking the steroids.
Right.
Right.
So the difference in that situation with men and women is when men take steroids, they don't get any side effects that will make them any less of a man. Right. Those I mean, they're really, if they get any more more manly, it's just like, that's a good thing. You're just going to be more of a man.
Well, but aside from gyno,
Right. But in most cases, like the sides that they're going to get, they've got like the internal organs and that type of thing. But in all reality, they don't have the same situation where with women, if women take too many drugs and they're not training right, their nutrition isn't right, they're not going to see results, but they're also going to have all this virilization. So virilization, for those of your listeners who don't know what that is when females start getting male attributes, like the hair, like under your chin, or even hair on your face, hair loss, things like that. So with women, what I end up seeing because I started being very open on my Instagram about talking about women and anabolics. So I started having a lot of women starting to come and talk to me and tell me, about different certain things. And, there are a lot of women who are taking these huge cycles that are really for men. And they don't look like they're on anything, but they have all these side effects. So it's like, I think with women, especially, I see this with younger women where they're in their early 20s. Maybe they've been training for 6 months and then they start cycles. And it's like, hold on, you haven't even maxed out your natural potential yet. Like your food isn't even on point. Your training, you haven't maxed out the potential of your training yet. And that's why they're taking all these cycles and they're not seeing a result, because they haven't even learned the basics yet. And like you're saying, you can take all the drugs you want, you can take all the anabolics you want, but if you're not eating right and training right, they're not going to do anything except for give you really bad side effects.
Right. And it's funny because people don't people get involved with, like, girls have boyfriends or whatever who, then they'll do what their boyfriends do. So their boyfriends will be like, well, you can do what I'm doing, but you just need to use less. So they get messed up that way. I've known way too many people who, like you said, were training for a short period of time, decided that they were going to compete. And it's like, they go to a coach, they get their training, they get their diet, and they get their drugs for the show. And it's like having had like
I know. This is baby. He is all over me all the time. I recently just had shoulder surgery, so he's like trying to take care of me all the time. He's a good boy.
They know that you're awesome. But yeah, they you know, it's like it was like the trifecta package you get, and it's like it just was mind-boggling to me. Like, why would you think that you need to do a cycle of drugs, you know,
when you haven't even competed yet? You don't even know if you like it.
Yes.
This is what I end up seeing with a lot of the young women is you have young women who, like you said, they want to compete for the first time. And then they end up hooking up with a coach that doesn't know the difference between cycles for men and cycles for women. And they're in their early 20s. They end up doing these cycles. Either they're not testing the drugs and it's not what they think that it is. Or like the cycle is just way too much for a woman. And then you get these 20-year-old women who, you know, bodybuilding is a phase for them. You know, it's not something that's going to be in their life forever. They do the show, and the boyfriend they were with, who's like, yeah, you can do anabolics. I don't mind the side effects. It's okay. That guy leaves them for someone else or for something else, or just because it didn't work out. And now this girl, this young 20-year-old girl, sometimes she's infertile after that. Sometimes she's just she hates herself so much for the virilization and for the permanent side effects that she gets depressed. She like is lonely because she doesn't want to date because she feels insecure about the changes in her body now. Because a lot of times they'll have the clitoral enlargement and they will not feel comfortable getting naked in front of men anymore. Okay, baby, you gotta stop. Get out of here. All right, there we go. But yeah, I mean, that's the saddest thing that I see is these women who are in their early 20s who essentially have ruined themselves because they become so insecure and so depressed from the side effects they now have that just they're not going to ever go away. So that's probably the saddest thing that I see.
Well, and the other thing, I mean, talking about guys too, like I know too many young guys who like, because they don't get the side effects, they're not monitoring it how they should be with their blood work, which is, you know, the only way to know everything is healthy on the inside is by doing blood work.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And I know so with my clients, you know, if they're going to do a cycle, I require that they get blood work before. I require that after we've run the PCT, they do the blood work after the PCT, and that we're giving them enough time off of cycles. Because one of the things I see with women far too often is women who just stay on cycles all year round, or they stay on them for far too long because they have a show on this date and then they have a show on another date. And they, you know, so they're running anabolics for 20, 30 weeks. And then barely taking any time off.
Well, and you have the same thing. I remember, so back a few years ago, John Jewett was mentoring me, and he would do voice notes for me telling me about drug cycles because I had a couple of clients who were using stuff, and, you know, I wanted to obviously know about, you know, coaching that. And I just wanted to know, you know. So he would send me these voice notes kind of explaining things. And one of the things he had said to me that really stuck was, you know, when especially guys are first getting into competing, he said you know, you do a cycle for, you know, 12 or 16 weeks, and then you have to cycle off. You do a PCT, you cycle off. And essentially you want to be off for as long as you were on. And he's like, and you have to work just as hard, but people see an instant, like they deflate because, you know, I don't know exactly how testosterone works, but you
lose that artificial look and that artificial fullness from the drugs. Right.
Yeah. So he's like, you can see that the struggle of wanting to stay on because you have to work just as hard off, and it's harder because you don't have the assistance of the drug. And doing this, if you're doing it properly, for years and years of on and off until finally, you know, you have to get to this, you get to this point where you're supporting so much muscle mass that you are doing your, blast and cruise phases or whatever.
Right.
But, a lot of these guys too, even still, if they're doing it correctly, will cycle off. They don't just go
Right.
into like a cruise phase, but.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, for men, it's a little different because when they're on cycle, I mean, it's not completely different, but it's different from them in the way that, when they cycle off, when they are doing their PCT, they're really just trying to get their testosterone production back up.
Right.
So what you'll see happen with men is men who abuse anabolics and don't come off and don't cycle off. Eventually, when they go to get off of everything, their testosterone, even with a PCT, will not come back.
Right.
And that's usually when they get to that point where they're blasting and cruising. Because if they were to come off and do PCT, that testosterone production just doesn't come back. So that's what you end up seeing, especially with competitors that have kind of been in it for a longer period of time, or that, or maybe they've just never came off of cycles before, and they've realized that if they try to PCT, or when they try to PCT, it just doesn't come back.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is, to me, it's fascinating. So it's really interesting to learn about. But anyways, let's get back to
women, because the men have enough information.
That's right. So, so let's talk about, I guess I want to talk about levels a little bit, because, I know, like, are there certain drugs, or is there certain, like, would you say, a bikini competitor should never be taking any type of a performance enhancing drug? Or is it something that
generally, okay, so here's my personal train of thought.
Okay.
And this is just me personally, like, honestly, I think that if you need to do if you need to do drugs for bikini in order to get a bikini shape, you probably should pick a different sport.
Right.
And I know that and the exceptions that I have to that are, if you have those women that when they diet down, they just, like, I had one bikini competitor that even in contest prep, she was eating 3,500 calories, and it was still really hard to keep the muscle on her. So she just blew through calories, blew through food. And if we didn't give her a little bit of something during a contest prep, she just wasn't going to maintain the muscle. She was going to look really stringy and strung out on stage. Yeah. So I think in cases like that, where you have women who, when they diet down, and diet down appropriately, not doing a crazy crash diet where you're eating 1,000 calories, doing 2 hours of cardio. Really, when you're dieting and you're doing it in a way that's not muscle wasting. Yeah. I think that in most cases, bikini, you're not really going to need much of anything.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I think that too, that's part of the problem, because you have, I'm not, like, in general, if you were to stereotype, you would say, bikini competitors, especially as they're beginning, the training style is more high volume, high reps, which is not, it's not
conducive to muscle building.
Exactly. Right. That's exactly it. So if your style of training isn't conducive for hypertrophy, you are also going to lose that muscle, because you're doing a cardiovascular type of a workout when you go into contest prep. Now, of course, your body is going to reach for that lean tissue, and that's how you're going to end up. So there's all these other variables when you take things that, like you said, with your client, you're doing everything right.
Right.
And now we still can't hold on to the tissue. So we're going to add a little Anavar or something.
And that's why, like, I do like a webinar with women where, I talk about, are you ready for anabolics? And one of the things that I say that, like, you need to check off of that list is, have you tried different training methods? Yeah. Have you tried BFR training? Have you tried doing drop sets? Have you tried rest pause sets? Have you tried lower rep ranges? Have you tried eating more food? The problem I see with bikini competitors, why they feel like they need to have anabolics, is because they're always dieting. If you are always in a calorie deficit, you are not going to gain muscle. Feed your damn self.
Right.
It really, like, when it comes down to it, like, I've had, you don't even know how many bikini competitors I have come to me that are like, I really want to do a cycle. You know, I don't put on, like, I have such a hard time putting on muscle. And I'm like, all right, how much cardio are you doing? How much food are you eating? And what do you do to lift? And like you said, they're doing, like, you know, banded booty workouts. They're doing reps of 15 to 20, not doing anything that's nothing to failure, absolutely nothing to failure. And they're wondering, and they're barely eating anything, and they're doing 2 hours of cardio a day. And it's like, if you expect to stay in contest shape year round, you will not gain muscle. You will not gain muscle.
Well, I mean, here's the issue is people want things quickly. So they don't want to put in the time. Like you said, it's like bodybuilding or competing is a phase for them. So you're not looking at it as a lifestyle, something you're going to be doing for the next 10 years or beyond. And, you know, and people want to be lean all the time. You know, they want to be lean all the time, but they still want to look like they're fit Instagram influencer, you know, or whatever, who's probably is living the lifestyle and, you know, day in and day out or whatever.
Right.
And what was my third point? And you know, women's and the view that we've been fed for the last however many years of what women's workouts are supposed to look like. So, you know, I get clients all the time who their training is like, well, you know, and I try to keep my heart rate elevated the whole time. Like that's something you know,
cardio.
I know, you know, and they think just because, you know, a class or something says it's resistance, means that they're going to be building muscle. And I'm like, no, it's still cardio. It's actually more like HIIT cardio, which is even harder to recover from and isn't building muscle at all.
It's even more muscle wasting. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And so I think that, like, when it comes to bikini competitors, I think less of them need it than they think they need it.
Right.
You know, the other case where I think that a bikini competitor would be okay doing some kind of anabolic is, you know, if their natural testosterone levels are really low, and maybe they are one of those women where, like, they just blow through food all the time, then maybe in the off season, giving them a very, very low dose for a very, very short period of time, then, you know, in certain cases, but in all reality, like, if you need to keep on doing cycles to be in bikini, there's something wrong with your training, your diet, or like you're just over cardioing yourself.
Right.
Or you need to get your blood work tested, because I think a lot of women don't realize they have low testosterone. And in that case, you don't necessarily want to be supplementing that with, you know, with anabolics, because you can't stay on anabolics for TRT, because it affects other, like, organ systems. But if you have naturally low test, doing something like trying to do some, like, natural testosterone booster to see if you can get it up at first. And if that doesn't work, then doing some kind of TRT where you're doing a testosterone replacement through a doctor, so that way your levels are where they're supposed to be. And in that case, when women actually get to, like, you know, a normal level of testosterone, they don't even need the anabolics anymore. You know, they just needed enough testosterone to maintain the muscle mass. So I think for a lot of bikini competitors, if they would just do their blood work, they would have a really good, and here's another thing. If you are a bikini competitor and you are on birth control, your birth control is part of the reason you're not maintaining muscle mass. It's part of the reason why you aren't getting as lean as you want to. Your birth control is pretty much putting you into a state where you're estrogen dominant. It also is going to make it so that your testosterone levels are a lot lower. So you are on birth control, get off your damn birth control first, and then try and gain some muscle. So it's like, I think a lot of women skip over the first part of what, like, taking care of blood work, taking care of natural testosterone, taking care of the training and the diet. They skip over all that, and they're just like, give me a magic pill.
Well, I think everybody does that because they don't, it's kind of like when you get questions on social media and you're like, okay, there's so much investigating I have to do in order to answer that question for you because you're an individual person.
Right. Right.
But my argument also is, I mean, I had my hormones tested for the first time. Well, I mean, we had trouble getting pregnant, so I went through a whole bunch of stuff with that. But first time I actually saw like hormone levels was probably 5 or 6 years ago. And my test levels are low. So I always say like they're just on the border of being low.
Right.
And so it was just enough where, my doctor's like, well, we can't really do anything about that. We can refer you out to a specialist if you want to try to get, but there's not a lot of that around here. And you definitely have to pay out of pocket for all that stuff. So I was like, honestly, I feel pretty good. I build muscle pretty easily, but my other side to that too is you have like two different kinds of people. You either have the people that build muscle more easily, but can't lose body fat, or you have the people that have washboard abs all the time, but can't put on muscle,
Right.
So you have to vary it, and that I don't know if that has anything to do with hormones. It's just a separate variable that you have to consider what kind of person you are. So,
right.
Yeah, because leaning out for me is like, is bullshit. I'll tell you right there.
I mean, that's how I am too, is like, people always would be like, oh, Jamie, it's so easy for you to get lean. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm like, I'm doing 2 hours of cardio. I'm barely eating anything. This is hard shit. Like, I feel like death every day. I'm like a zombie. No, it's not easy for me. Just because I do get lean doesn't mean that but I'm one of those where it's much easier for me to put on muscle and it's much harder for me to lose the body fat. My ex-husband, he was like the absolute opposite. So that was always fun when we were both competing at the same time, because I'd be starving and he'd be like, oh, I have to eat so much food. And I'm like, you're dieting and you're complaining about how much food you have to eat. Like, come on.
Not fair.
It's never fair. The guys always have it easier. They have it easier when it comes to the anabolics, to the dieting, everything. With women, like we've got to be that much more careful. And I think when it comes to like your question about, do certain divisions, should they use a certain amount or a certain thing? It really, what it comes down to with women is it's so individual. It is so very individual. But the one thing I will say overall is that women can usually use a lot less than what they're using. They end up like taking these like large amounts of doses or these cycles that have multiple compounds. And they aren't even letting their body, like they aren't starting low and then working their way up. They are starting at, 20 milligrams of Anavar twice a day, or 100 milligrams of Primo every week, whatever it may be, instead of working their way up to it. Because when it comes, like the difference between men and women is we are so much more sensitive to anabolics. You put a man on 5 milligrams of testosterone 3 times a week, nothing's really going to happen. You do that to a woman and she can start virilizing. So the difference, we are so much more sensitive. And here's the thing, our levels of androgens vary between us so differently. So you might have really low levels of testosterone and androgens, and I might have really high levels. So when I take 20 milligrams of Anavar, my voice is going to drop, my hair is going to start falling out. But when you take 20 milligrams of Anavar, you might just feel normal because you were already low. So it's just going to bring you to kind of like baseline. Where for me, if my levels are already high and then I start taking, 20 milligrams of Anavar, where the 20 milligrams didn't do anything to you, my hair's falling out, my clit's enlarged, everything so that's why there's no bikini cycle. There's no figure cycle. There's no figure doses. There's no women's physique doses. It's how does your body respond to it? And what sides are you okay with having for the rest of your life? Because one thing that women need to understand is that the sides that you may possibly get for the rest of your life. So you've got to be okay when you first start knowing that. And I don't care what you use or how little you use, something is going to happen to your body. You will have some kind of side, whether or not you can see it or not.
Yeah.
It like, that's kind of a moot point. Like you are going, like something is going to happen. And when you start using more and more, you are going to get some kind of side effect. It's, you know, you're putting a drug into your body that your body doesn't naturally produce.
Well, and I think that one of the biggest elements that need to be talked about here is just the element of patience. So whether you are training and eating, you need to see what that looks like for several
Right.
years done correctly. And then once you start adding in, you know, one compound at a time at a very low dose, if you feel like that's where you're going to go, you need to see how your body responds to that also. And it's just all the time, it's the blood work, it's like you said, just the biofeedback and seeing how you respond to something. And
Right.
you know, people aren't patient enough to put in that much effort into something. You
And
know,
that's what I say to like a lot of the bikini girls that want to start cycles is like, you don't need anabolics. And even like the more like, you know, more high level women's physique women who want to use like tren. And I'm like, you don't need tren. You don't need all these drugs. You need more time training, and you need to nail your diet, and you need to work harder. You know, most of the time when I was my off seasons, I really didn't run any anabolics in my off seasons. I really let myself clean out during that time. And the off season that I did that, man, I got to use so much less, and it was so much more effective for me.
right.
You know, come contest prep time. So, you know, what ends up happening with a lot of women is they're just staying on all the time. And guess what? It stops being effective at that lower dose. Now you've got to use more. Now you've got to use more. Now you've got to use. So you go from being able to use 10 milligrams of Anavar and having that be effective to now you're up to 20 milligrams of Anavar and Primo and Tren and Test and all this other shit that you got to throw in the pot.
Well, and one of the things that I definitely wanted to talk about too was because oh, I was going to say something else too, but because this is, you know, these are illegal, at least here in the United States, for women especially, they need to be aware of like a drug like Anavar is expensive when it's real, which is why a lot of times it's not real. So,
Right.
you know, you don't know what you're getting when you're putting it into your body. And
Exactly.
you know, and you don't know, you could have been somebody who responded like that to Anavar normally if it was real, or you could be somebody who is responding and getting viralization because you're taking, you know, Winnie or something else. You know,
Right.
you don't
And
know.
Anavar is probably like Anavar and Primo are two of like the more like safer compounds for women. And those are the two most expensive for underground labs to make. So they are the two that are faked the most. So when it comes like the thing that I tell women, especially if it's their first time use, I really like anytime you use, you should really test your anabolics.
Yeah.
They have testing kits. Go to roidtest.com. And they have testing kits for everything. So, you know, even if you think that your source is trusted, test it, because you don't know who did your source get it from? Where did they get their raws from?
Right.
Did they get the raws from the same distributor that they got from them from before? Because just because you're getting it from Joe Schmo from the gym again, and you got it from him last time, and last time you used his Anavar, you didn't get sides, but this time you're using it, and suddenly you're up 10 pounds. All of a sudden your face is broken out, your voice is dropped, but you got it from the same guy, so it must be the same, right? That's why I encourage women, like, make sure, even if you're getting it from the same source, test it. I mean, I know that there have been in the past times when I've gotten it from the same person, and when I tried it the second time, I definitely, like, I could tell my hair started falling out right away. I broke out like crazy, and I was like, this is not Anavar. And I knew right away, like within a couple days I knew, but you know, shame on me for not actually testing it. And that's now when it, like, even if I get it from the same person, I'm going to test it every single time because I don't want to have to go through that again. I know for me, like when my whole face is broken out and my hair is falling out in sheets, I feel like shit, and I feel bad about myself, and I don't feel attractive. And you also have that sense of like, I know a lot of women deal with this when they start getting sides from either bad gear or a bad cycle. You know, you have a lot of guilt associated with that. You have a lot of like internal shame for letting yourself do that to yourself too. So, you know, just avoid all of that by testing whatever you get, because right now, anabolics, and this is part of the problem that I see with women, is it's so readily available now. It's so you can, like, before, back in the day, before the internet was, you know, this expansive, you know, you had to know someone that knew someone that could get you anabolics. You knew a guy at the gym or something like that. Now you go online, you type in buy Anavar US, and you've got tons of sites that are going to give you places to buy Anavar. Now, plenty of people use those sites and get it, and who knows if it's real or not. You don't know where this shit is coming from. So it's like that readily available, you know, fast pill, you know, make it happen right now. That kind of like whole part of society right now that also has made this like perfect storm for women to really get and damage themselves with this stuff.
Well, and with, you know, with growing social media and everything too, people feel like they compare themselves to other people. And, you know, it's like you want to look like this person or whatever. It's kind of funny because when, like you were talking about Larissa Reese too, when social media first came out and Instagram, like I met her at the 2014 Arnold Sports Festival. And when I met her, like this was before like Instagram really didn't even have a lot of like video and stuff. So you see these people and you're like, oh my gosh, you know, like, oh, I'm sure she's natural. Like, you know, and then you talk to them and like their voice is so low. But with social media now, it's so much easier, I guess, to see, especially for someone who's seasoned, to look at and say that's not a natural competitor. Whereas when we just saw pictures, it's kind of like, I mean, it's just like growing up in the 90s when you saw airbrushed magazine covers and you were like, oh, people really look like that, because you can't see them in person or moving in a video or whatever. You know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that to a trained eye, you can tell, but you still have those women who have this false idea that you can look like, and I make Dana Lynn Bailey the best example, because she is someone who, you know, if she's a genetic freak, good for her. I really, to me, to my trained eye, I look at her and you know she's on something. And the fact that she lies about it and says, I'm natural, I never did anything, I'm natural, it gives women this false sense of what's available to them and what is possible. And so they, you know, they get this false sense of, oh, you know, I used to have female clients come to me all the time. I want to look just like Dana Lynn Bailey and I don't want to use any drugs at all because I want to be just like her. And this is one of the reasons I really don't like her, is because she really gives women this false sense of what is possible. And to me, I'd rather just not say anything at all than to blatantly lie to people about it. Because then you get these women who really think that it's possible. And could she be a genetic freak and have a lot of muscle? Yes. But to get that hardness, to get that density, anyone who knows anabolics and have seen that, like you're only getting that with hardeners, with like anabolics. So, you know, but when an untrained eye, they don't know, they're going to take their word for it. You know, and that's a huge problem in this industry too, is you've got so many that just will blatantly lie that they're natural when in fact, you know, there may be a few genetic freaks. They're the exception to the rule. Everyone else, you've got to really, like, if you want that hard, dense look, you're going to have to use anabolics for that.
Yeah. No, I mean, you just, it is. And it sucks because it's not because you want to know somebody's business, but when they're putting something out there, you just would like to have the disclaimer for the sake of, is this within the realm of what I'm willing to do? You know, because I mean, like even with myself, when I am leaner, like I still don't, you know, pictures you can't tell, because if they see me in person and they're like, oh, you're small, and you don't have that, I don't have the round bubbliness that you would get from using, you know, any type of a performance enhancing drug. So to me, it's very obvious that I, you know, that I'm not using something, but but even so, I still have been training for 10 years.
Right.
You know what
Right.
I mean? So it's like, if you think you pick something that you decide you want to look like, what you need to decide is what your body can do and what you're willing to do in order to achieve that body. And usually it's something like, if muscle is involved, you're going to be putting years and years and years into
Right.
it. Yeah.
Right. Right. And I think that social media, again, is part of the problem here, because you get people that, like coaches, I'm not going to name any, that put these transformations of clients up where you see someone who looks like they didn't work out, they look overweight, and then all of a sudden they're shredded, ripped, and hard. And
Months.
six month transformation, but they don't say they don't say what kind of drugs they were on. B, they also don't say what the fuck happened to this woman after.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, the backlash of something like a transformation like that, a lot of times you never see that woman ever again. And there's a reason, because her hormones are so motherfucked from whatever she did to get into that amazing 6-month transformation.
Yeah.
I also I get why a lot of coaches can't blatantly say that, okay, here's the cycle she was on, because you're not going to blast out your client's information.
Sure.
Right, exactly. It's their personal choice to kind of, air that out if they want to. But at the same time, I think it also, again, gives women this false sense of, oh, why can't, I have plenty of my competitors who look at those transformations and they're like, well, I don't understand why she can do it in 6 months and I can't. And I'm like, because I want to keep you a woman.
Yeah.
Because I don't want, after we're done with this 6 months, I want you to be able to live and be happy with yourself and to have hormones still.
Well, so let's talk about the fallout of that a little bit. So, and I had said this to you before, because I don't quite understand why, I know of people who have come from coaches and are now completely infertile because they have run these, let's say, the drugs that are off for women, like that women shouldn't be taking. Not that, I'm sure, I don't know, can years and years of mild Anavar use also cause infertility? Probably, right? I mean, you don't know what things can.
So that's the problem is, okay, so the first thing we don't know is a whole lot about, there's no medical studies done about women and anabolics. So a lot of the information that coaches like myself get, they're from other studies and from just working with lots of clients, right? Or they're from other studies that are cancer patients and stuff like that. Maybe women with PCOS, studies about those types of things. Okay. So a couple of things that I found in other studies is, when women's testosterone serum, in their serum blood test is too high, the concentration is too high, it's going to stop menstruation. It's going to stop certain enzymes in the cells in their ovaries from converting certain hormones. So you end up, having these high levels of testosterone in your body for long periods of time. It ends up disrupting your menstruation. When you disrupt your menstruation and your own hormonal production, because a lot of your hormones are produced where? In your ovaries, right? So if you are shutting down that production, a lot of times, if you're doing that for a long period of time, what's going to happen? When you come off of the anabolics, you think your body is just going to start producing those things again after years of not producing them, maybe even just months of not producing them. You think they're just going to pick back up? No, unfortunately, it doesn't. And that's, I think, the biggest thing that we see with infertility with women. And, that's not, that's kind of conjecture. So I don't want people to think that's direct science of this is how anabolics cause infertility, because really all of it is conjecture right now because we don't have any studies on it.
Well, and I was thinking about this earlier, what the equivalent would be. So back in the day when I was younger, I was a pot smoker for about a year and a half with my first boyfriend when I was like 19, 20. And I remember I had it was a good, like, we would smoke pot, we would watch movies. It was a happy high. I would, eat ice cream and whatnot. And it was just, I remember it as like a good experience.
Right.
Since then, not anytime recently, but I have smoked pot a couple of times. And one time I had really bad anxiety, like I was freaking out about it. And and then the other time, like, I just wanted to go to sleep. I was so tired. So
Yeah.
you have an illegal drug, you don't really know what you're getting, and you don't really know how the individual is going to respond, and they're not going to respond the same every time. So you don't know what you're getting.
Right, exactly.
Right?
And I think the thing that we see that causes the most infertility in women when it comes to PEDs is extended use of the more androgenic compounds. So the things that are more likely to give you the androgenic like side effects.
Yeah. So there's two kinds, right? There's a kind that, like, I kind of in layman's terms say there's the things that affect your internal organs and there's the things that affect you on the outside for the most part, right? Is this kind of the two different
That's
types?
that's not really how it works.
Okay.
So, because here's the thing, no matter what, they're all going to affect your internal organs.
Okay.
They're all going to affect your internal organs. So all of them affect the internal organs. Every single one can affect your external appearance.
Okay.
So
I was always taught that like Anavar was a safe drug because you wouldn't get the external, which is like what most people are concerned about is,
Have you heard of a woman taking Anavar and getting external side effects though?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know if she really was taking Anavar.
So here's the thing. I have clients who I make my clients test their gear. If you're going to use anabolics with me, you're going to be testing it.
Okay.
So I've had women who have tested their anabolics. It is Anavar, and they still get the hair loss. They still get acne. Their voice drops. Because here's how it works. So every compound has an anabolic component to it and an androgenic component to it. So anabolic is the muscle building part. So there's a ratio. Every single compound has a ratio, an anabolic to androgenic ratio. So the anabolic part is the part that the women want. That's the retain the muscle, building the muscle mass, more recovery. The androgenic is what women don't want. That's where you get the virilization. That's the male attributes, side effects. That's the stuff we don't want. So even something like Anavar has an androgenic component to it. But when you look at the ratio, the anabolic number is like for Anavar is, I want to say it's like, I don't know, it's pretty high. I think it might be like 200. And then the androgenic number is like 30. Okay. So you're looking at that ratio. You want the anabolic part to be high and the androgenic part to be low. So the women who are using anabolics that have a high androgenic part of that, like anabolics, that's where we see more problems with fertility. Because again, if you're putting something in your body that's more androgenic, it's gonna raise your testosterone levels. It's gonna raise the androgen levels in your body. And when those levels get too high in your blood, that's when we see like the hormone production in your ovaries get messed up. So that's when we see more. And the longer you're on those things, the more likely you're going to have complications. So another other drugs that kind of like will also affect fertility a lot is anti-estrogens. So you have some anti-estrogens that are just blocking the receptor. So that's something like Nolvadex. It's not really an anti-estrogen. It's more of it's called a SERM. So you're not affecting how much estrogen is being produced. You are just blocking it from being binded to the receptors in your body. Okay. Where you have things like Arimidex, Aromacin, those are actually changing how much estrogen is in your body. So it's changing the conversion of testosterone into estrogen. So that's actually affecting how much estrogen you actually have. And when we do that, when it comes time for you to come off of those things, again, it's affecting your natural production. So then it's not coming back right away.
Okay. Well, I was thinking like, you know, like guys will, I mean, of women who have used, like if you, like there's no safe dose of testosterone, right? Small, big, like you're, like you shouldn't.
So in my opinion, if you have a normal testosterone level, you do not want to supplement with test, because when your testosterone level gets above like where it should be for a woman, you're going to have sides. So even if it's a low dose, unfortunately, what happens with injectable testosterone is with women is the first week, if they're doing a low dose, it doesn't seem to really like affect them that much. But as they keep on taking it, it compounds even more and more. And so you end up, because I see this with HRT clinics a lot, where they prescribe even a low dose to women, and then I get the blood numbers and their testosterone's like 400, which is way too much for a woman, like way too much. So, but they're still only taking a small dose. So even with testosterone, like that's not something like, if you're trying to prep for a show, you're really looking for the anabolics to, because really like when you're prepping for a show, it's not a time to build muscle. No. It's a time to shred down. So using the anabolics, they should aid like maintaining the muscle mass you already have, and really just giving you that hard, dense look on stage. Doing something like testosterone, it's going to help maintain that muscle mass, but it's really not going to do that much in like the look that you want to get on stage. So I don't, unless a woman comes to me and her testosterone is tanked, I'm not giving her any testosterone in a cycle.
So even somebody who's on TRT, aren't they, then they should be getting small doses and then their blood work checked, so that, because eventually they won't need it, or they would need the doses spaced out or something like that. So this is a
TRT. If it's someone like, say, usually women who are on TRT are already postmenopausal, right? So in most cases, there are like a few rare cases where you get women who have low test, like natural low test. But in that case, it's like, they should be checking it every 4 weeks and starting with a low dose and going from there. But unfortunately, HRT clinics are mostly what? They're out of pocket, right? They're mostly out of pocket, and you are getting your drugs through them. So I had put up a post not too long ago where I said, make sure you're not getting your gear advice from your drug dealer, because guess what? Money, they want your money. Right. Same thing with HRT clinics. HRT clinics overprescribe testosterone to women because money. The more you take, the more money they make. So they end up giving them doses that are just way beyond therapeutic. And when we say therapeutic doses, we want it just to be where it should be, like normally. So you have these HRT clinics that are overprescribing to these women. And if it's a case where it's a woman in menopause, she's going to be on TRT forever. Once she gets off the TRT, she's going to have no testosterone. So in those cases, like once you're on TRT, you're on TRT. And usually the way it goes is you test every 4 weeks until you find the dose that like puts you right where you want to be. But younger women who maybe they've abused anabolics, and I have a lot of clients like this that have abused anabolics and they want to get their natural levels back. And then in that case, there might be a period where you do a little bit of TRT in order to get some testosterone back, get the client feeling good. And then we're weaning them off of that TRT and doing like a testosterone boosting protocol to try and get it up. But usually when you get to the point where you need TRT, it's not coming back.
Okay. Wow. And this can, and you just can't, there's no way of knowing if this is going to happen to you or not. It could be through one contest prep cycle that you have made yourself infertile.
Right. I mean, and that's really, you don't see that a whole lot where like someone does one cycle of Anavar and they're ruined for life. Generally that doesn't happen. What I see more often, and like, but there are cases where either the woman took too much Anavar, maybe she just already has high levels of androgens and took the Anavar, whatever it may be. There are a few rare cases where they take 20 milligrams of Anavar for 12 weeks and they've got permanent sides forever. You don't really see, I haven't really seen that often where like you take one cycle of Anavar and you're infertile forever. Could it happen? There's that possibility, but it's more likely that the women who keep on taking cycles and don't PCT after, they don't know, because what will happen is when you go on the Anavar, your natural testosterone tanks, right? So then when you get off of the Anavar, if you don't PCT, it's still down here. It doesn't come back up. So then you've got to take more Anavar next time to get those levels back up. And then when you come back down, the levels are even lower this time. And so you get the women who cycle on and off still, but they aren't PCTing. They're not taking enough time off. And so by the time they're done competing, don't want to do cycles anymore, and they want babies, well, now they have no more hormones because they haven't taken care of them through the cycles.
A PCT is for a woman is just a break, right? Or are you?
No, post-cycle therapy is actually, you're supporting hormone production. So usually with a PCT, there's a couple things you're trying to do. When you take anything, especially Anavar, that is toxic to your liver. So you need to make sure that you're taking care of your internal organs. Your blood lipids are probably going to be off, your kidney values, your liver values, and also like your hormones are going to be off a little bit. So with a PCT, our aim is to get all of your blood work back to baseline. Let's get you back to homeostasis where your hormone levels are good and all of your levels for all your internal organs are looking good. Then take some time off, being nice and healthy, get your period at least 2 or 3 times. If you are not getting your period in between cycles, that is a huge problem. Yeah. They're like, getting your period is a good thing. It is healthy. And what women don't understand, it's sad. It really is sad because you have these women who think that not having a period is like a badge of honor because they're so lean. I don't get my period, or I'm on this birth control that I don't get my period. That's not good. And unfortunately, what you see is when these women get into their late 40s or even early 40s, they're already going through menopause and their menopause blows. It's hard. So do yourself a favor, take care of your hormones now, get your period now, so that way you can still be getting your period when you're 50, because really that's what you want. The minute you start going through menopause, you are prematurely aging yourself. That is not what you want at all. It may sound lovely because you're not getting your period anymore. And trust me, I hate it too. I hate getting my period. Everyone does, but it's a sign of good health. So part of PCT is also making sure you get 1 or 2, like at least 2 cycles. You want at least 2 cycles.
So do you think that even with women who are taking birth control that suppresses a menstrual cycle should go off it to have a menstrual cycle or 2 before they go back on it, like maybe annually or something?
I do not let women who are on birth control take anabolics.
Yeah.
Because if you just get off the birth control, you don't need the anabolics in most cases. Like, just get off the birth control. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire, but also trying to put the fire out at the same time. It's like, what do you want to do?
Dumpster.
You don't want to throw. Here's the thing, like birth control is already making a shitstorm of your hormones. And then you're going to throw more hormones into the mix.
Yeah.
You're looking for a disaster because essentially what your birth control is doing is making you estrogen dominant. You start putting in more hormones that are going to make you more prone to be estrogen dominant in your body. You're going to make yourself into a situation where, it's going to be fucking harder for you to lose body fat. It's just one more variable that you don't need to be dealing with when we're talking about anabolics in women. So really, if you're taking anabolics and you're taking birth control, I don't understand that. The worst I see is women who take birth control, anabolics, and Nolvadex or an anti-estrogen. So they're taking estrogen and then they're taking an anti-estrogen with their estrogen. And it's like, why don't you just not take the estrogen instead of taking an anti-estrogen with your estrogen? It just, the logic behind that, I don't get at all. And I think it comes from women not understanding what any of these things do.
Yeah, well, and I think birth control is prescribed for so many things. You know, oh, you have painful periods, here, let's put you on birth control. Oh, you have acne, oh, let's put you on birth control. You know, I was diagnosed with endometriosis when I was 21, and you know, for probably 2.5 years my doctor we tried different birth controls. I mean, thankfully, probably about 1.5 years. I'm thankful that that's as long as I was ever on birth control, because I just kept going back to, I mean, you know, I'm very aware of my body. I always have been. I'm very sensitive to any type of any prescription, anything that I put in. I can't take anything without having side effects. So I was always very aware of that. And I would go back, you know, after a month of being on a new birth control. I hate this one. It makes me up 10 pounds. I have acne or whatever. And they would always be like, no, that's supposed to help those types of, you know, well, it's not, you know, so you gotta want to be on.
And I think that women need to understand that birth control is, it's a steroid. You are taking steroids already. They're technically a steroid. And I think the worst thing that I see is that doctors don't really warn women what birth control is doing to their bodies. So there is a reason why there are such, like, since the birth of birth control, we now have more and more reproductive cancer in women. We have more and more women with heart issues. We have more and more women with breast cancer. There's a direct correlation. So, you know, the women who have been on birth control for long periods of time, I urge you, do your own research about birth control, because it's terrible for you. If I was to ever have children, ever have a daughter, I would fucking never let her take birth control, ever. No way. It, like, higher risk for Parkinson's, for Alzheimer's. So they're finding that birth control is causing all of these terrible issues with women, and your doctors aren't warning you about it, because unfortunately,
Big Pharma.
Big Pharma is the one who's telling all the medical schools what to teach all of these med students in school. So, you know, it's not that your doctor is bad. It's not that your doctor is stupid. It's that this is the curriculum that your doctor has been given. And this is the solution your doctor has been told to give you. It's, you know, I don't really fault them for it. A little bit I do, because if I know this information, they should know it. And with everything, all the information we have at our fingertips with the internet, there's really no reason why your gynecologist shouldn't be smart enough to tell you the risk factors for these things.
But this is the issue this is the American way. You know what I mean? Like with anything, even with, you know, with everything with COVID and whatnot too, you know, if you go to a doctor and you're overweight, people ask for a pill. And just like we're talking about now, I want to build muscle. What's the pill that's going to get me there easily? No, nobody wants to, the work isn't sexy. You know what I mean? So, And that's kind of, I mean, that's what I had discovered too, with managing endometriosis. It's like, okay, if or painful periods, when my diet is cleaned up, when I'm drinking enough water, sleep, stress management, all the, you know, the 5 things, exercise, it's manageable, you know?
And, you know, I ask a lot of women, you know, because I have a lot of women that like come to me and they, you know, they either want to use anabolics or they're just trying to lose weight and they're on birth control. And they're like, well, I need to be on it because my periods are so bad. And I'm like, well, hold on a minute. Did you try DIM? Did you try calcium deglucarate? Did you try all of these over-the-counter things that are not going to affect the rest of the rest of your body for the rest of your life? So, I mean, the thing that is kind of scary to me is that the very first thing a doctor will do when the first time you go to a gynecologist is put you on birth control. Like they won't even ask you if you have bad periods. It's just, oh, you're of age? Okay, you're 13, you're coming for your first pap smear. Here's some birth control. So, you know, one thing to kind of think to yourself is, okay, we give 12, 13-year-old girls, it's HRT. We're giving them hormone therapy for young girls. Now, ask yourself the same question. If you had a 12-year-old boy, would you start giving him injections of testosterone?
Right.
No, we don't do that. Why don't we do that? But we're willing to
Right.
blast estrogen and progesterone in women, but not in men, and not testosterone in young boys.
Yeah. Or why aren't we doing a mass reversible sterilization for men, for boys? You know what I'm saying? Like, why are we going to the girls and saying, well, if you want to avoid getting pregnant, which takes 2 people, you have to take this pill, you know?
Right. And, you know, I think women need to be more mindful of how their menstruation affects the rest of their health. And knowing that, you know, if you haven't had your period in a couple of years because you're on low estrogen and you just, either you're always just skipping the week that you're supposed to have your period, or you're only supposed, you know, with this pill, I only get it twice a year. That's terrible for you. And if you want to have a good menopause, if you want to stay young and youthful and healthy and fertile, you know, my number one suggestion is do not get on birth control and get off as soon as you possibly can.
Yeah. No, I know. I mean, my daughter and I, we were just talking about this yesterday because she was saying how one of her friends had gone, she's 15. And I think it was last year, one of her classmates had gone on birth control for, I mean, it was a short period of time, but still it was for her acne, you know?
Yeah.
And I had told her a story about my first interaction with a girl who she said that I was working at a factory, and she was a single mom. And she said that her mom gave her birth control starting when she was like 12 or 13. She had a pill every morning with her breakfast, and she like missed one and ended up getting pregnant, you know? I was saying that's because you're so fertile when you're that young, you know? But I would never do that with her. And I mean, Anna has bad periods just like, you know, I do. And I'm like, you know, this is manageable. You just have to put the effort towards the variables that will make it manageable, which is hard for a kid, you know?
Right.
But
yeah. And I think that, I mean, I think that us women also have to be okay with like, periods suck. You're going to get cramps. You're going to bleed. Like, that's kind of part of it. Like, yeah, your boobs hurt and everything. Like, you get bloated. Like, yeah, that's called getting your period. I think that we have this, we're kind of all a bunch of big fucking pussies these days, where it's like any kind of little bit of adversity, oh my God, it's so terrible, I can't handle it, it's so hard. And it's like, God damn, do you know how many women had their periods that didn't even have ibuprofen for cramps back in the day? Like, I remember my mom telling me stories because she had terrible periods. And you know, this is back before they had ibuprofen. And or like would give ibuprofen for cramps, and she's like, you know, they used to give me what was like something like codeine for her cramps and stuff. So she'd be like completely out of it. But I mean, really, I think that we need to stop being so comfy, and we have to be okay with a little adversity and a little bit of cramps and bleeding. Like, you know, that's part of being a woman. That's part of having your period. And it's like, you know, when everyone's like, oh, my period is so bad. And it's like, really, like, how bad is it really? Like, well,
it's because
I don't know.
The tampon commercials made it look like they're supposed to, you know, we're supposed to be running through a field of daisies.
Right. But it's like, you know, I almost think that we kind of have, you know, cushioned our children and even like, you know, just like the younger generations where like a little bit of pain and a little bit of adversity and they're like, oh my God, I need birth control. Like my period is too bad. And it's like, really, what, like, is it really too bad? Like, I don't know. I think that as women, like it's prepping you for something. Like there's a reason why our bodies, like why our periods aren't fucking roses and daisies, because it's preparing you to be okay with childbirth. You know, like I know that childbirth these days is a lot better and it's obviously a lot more successful than it used to be 200 years ago. But we've got to kind of think that there were biological reasons for the things that happen in our bodies. And for us to be like, nope, let's just not have a period anymore. There's going to be there's going to be long-term consequences for that. You're turning off an entire system in your body. You're messing with a whole, and I think women need to understand that, your birth control and your hormones and your reproductive health, all those hormones, they have hundreds of different functions in your body. Not having any progesterone in your body, that's going to lead to a lot of sleepless nights. That's the thing that kind of like calms you down and helps you sleep. I know that like I had a lot of hormonal issues of my own. When I had no progesterone, I didn't fucking sleep. I was completely insomniac. And I see that with my women with no progesterone. So, there are other, and like same with estrogen. If we have no estrogen at all, you're going to feel like fucking garbage. If you have too much estrogen, same thing. You're going to feel bloated. You're going to feel like you feel like you have PMS all the time. Yeah. So, when we mess with these things, they have other consequences in other systems in our bodies too, because our hormones do more than just give us our period.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so let's talk about, let's wrap this up with, where was I going to go with this? So let's talk about what are some of the things that women can do as far as like, hold on a second. All right, here we go. So yeah, so let's talk about a little bit about how, what people are supposed to look for, like with a coach, what would make a good coach, and what are some red flags, those types of things. Like I like your list that you were talking about before. So let's talk about that a little bit.
So, the first thing you want to think about, because I know like, say you have a coach and your coach is recommending a anabolic cycle for you. The first thing to consider is, did the coach tell you what the possible side effects are? Did they warn you what could possibly happen? Are they having you run blood work beforehand? So, these are the things to ask yourself before you trust a coach with a cycle that they're prescribing for you. Because if they haven't warned you of the sides, if they haven't asked for any blood work, those are red flags to me, because they're not taking where your health is right now into consideration with the cycle. You want to make sure that you have a coach that's thinking, okay, if she already has high levels of testosterone, or if she's already estrogen dominant, I'm not going to have her do X, Y, and Z, or I'm going to have her do X, Y, and Z. Another red flag to look at for coaches is if you've never done anabolics before, if they give you a cycle that has 5 different compounds on it, that's a huge red flag. You always want to make sure that you try a compound on its own first before you start mixing compounds together. So if you go to coach, I don't know, George, and he's giving you VAR, Tren, testosterone, and you're like, I've never done a cycle before, this is my first show, I wouldn't trust George with anything anymore. So those are like 3 of my big red flags for coaches is like, I know we all want to trust our coaches, but unfortunately with this day and age of social media, everyone's a coach now. So making sure that they give you an understanding of what the risks are. And then after you kind of get the rundown from them of the risks, what I suggest that you do is make a list of the side effects you are not okay with. The things that, and do this before you start the cycle. Do it before you start the cycle. Please, please, please do it before you start the cycle. Because, and what I say is like, make that list, and then you're going to give that list to someone you trust with your fucking life. Right. Your best friend, your mom, maybe it's your coach. Maybe it is your coach if you trust your coach. Yeah. And you give them that list and you say, okay, I'm going to start doing something. And if you notice that I'm compromising any of those things, I want you to fucking slap me in the face and kick my fucking ass until I stop taking it. Yeah. And that's why it needs to be someone you trust your life with. And for myself at that time, it was my husband at the time that I trusted that with. And so when we started to go too far, he was the one that was like, Jamie, like your voice really like has dropped quite a bit. Like, we've noticed this is so having someone that's an advocate for you. And I say, do it before your cycle, because this is what I see all too often with women is they start the cycle. It changes the brain chemistry. You are not going to make decisions on cycle the way you make them off cycle. So you see women who get, I called them contest prep blinders. So you get to contest prep blinders on and all you see is the goal. All you see is winning. And so what you do is you say, I'll do whatever it takes to win. And that's when you have some coaches that take advantage of that and say, oh, here, throw some testosterone in, or, oh, throw some tren in. That'll help. That'll lean me up real good. And the women are just like, okay, I'll do whatever it takes to win. And then they go to that show, they don't win, and they walk off a stage, they come off their cycle, and they're stuck with these side effects forever. And they go, what the fuck did I do? Yeah. And they hate themselves for it. So making sure that you make that list before the cycle and give it to someone you trust, because like you and I were talking earlier, a lot of times the progression of these side effects is really slow and steady. Yeah. And it's partly because the transition is slow and steady, but it's also partly because our brain chemistry isn't quite the same. We don't quite make the same decisions on cycle as we would off cycle. And I've been there too, where people like need to like snap me out of it. They're like, Jamie, what the fuck? Like, what are you doing to yourself? But that's why you have those advocates there for you. That's why you have someone you trust. And that's why you make that list in the first place. So those are like my biggest, kind of like my advice to women is, watch out for those red flags. Make sure you're with a coach that, if you guys are starting off a cycle, that if he's starting off your cycle at, high doses, you want to make sure that you're taking the least amount of that drug possible first. Well, and then waiting before you up that dose, because you want to see if it's causing any side effects. If you start your Anavar, all right, and so let's talk about Anavar when it comes to dosages. A woman should not have to take, you shouldn't be taking any more than 20 milligrams of Anavar a day. If you need more than 20 milligrams of Anavar a day, it might not be real or it might not be Anavar. You should notice something with 20 milligrams. There's no reason. I don't think that it doesn't do anything beneficial to take more than 20. Yeah.
I had been taught that a beginning cycle was 5 milligrams or 5 milligrams twice a day. Even.
So a beginning cycle would be 5 milligrams a day. Yeah. So you want to try and split that AM, PM. That's where you want to start. You want to start at 5 milligrams a day. You're going to stay there at 5 milligrams a day for 2 weeks. For 2 weeks. We want to see in not 5 days and then you up it, 2 weeks. And if in 2 weeks you're like, fuck, I'm harder, I'm bigger, I'm like, I look like this is amazing. And if it's working, stop. Don't take any more. If it's working, you don't need to take more. Yeah. Because you want to be able to have the least amount work for you. So once you find the amount, so say after 2 weeks, you don't notice anything with the 5 milligrams, then you can go up to 10 milligrams a day, wait another 2 weeks. And if in 2 weeks at 10 milligrams, you're like, fuck, I look bomb, like everything's working, like I'm stronger, like everything's harder, I'm like getting the results I'm looking for, stay there. You don't have to go up.
So normally this would be like during a contest prep or like a cycle. So how long would that be before someone then did a PCT?
So, I really recommend that women, especially for their first cycle, like keep your first cycle short. Keep your first cycle to like 6 to 8 weeks. Make sure you like what's going on. Make sure your body like responds the way you want it to respond. So keeping a shorter cycle is going to be better for you. You don't really want to go past like 12, 14 weeks. You want to keep it in that 12, 14 week range. And then after that, you want to start your PCT right away. And after you want to be on your PCT for about 6 weeks and then get some blood work done.
Okay. Well, and I think that's that just is a good base for people to understand that when you're like, maybe this is your first contest prep, a coach would probably introduce that at like the 10-week out mark or the 8-week out mark. And you would just finish off your prep, like you said, where you're trying to hold on to that lean tissue and prevent the wasting.
Exactly. Yes. Yep.
So, and obviously people get to different levels and onto the pro level where they're taking a lot more stuff, but they have we all know that's part of it, and we know that they've earned it and they've gotten to that point, and they're also in it as almost a career choice at that point.
And honestly, I mean, here's my thought about it. Cause like, I'll tell you the truth. Like the years I looked the best were
Yeah.
the years I used the least amount of anabolics.
Yeah.
And I was competing on the Olympia stage.
Yeah.
So honestly, the way I see it is if you need a lot of drugs to compete at a high level, this probably isn't the sport for you.
Yeah.
And it's just like if you were, I don't know, say you were a runner, and say in running, like, you had to wear fucking special shoes to run, and like you needed to take all of these drugs to, like, really, are you meant for that sport?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I just feel like if it's taking you a lot of drugs
from the beginning,
and like, I say this especially about DNP, like you see people who are like, I take DNP to get lean. If you need a fucking poison to get lean, you need a new fucking sport is what you need. I just feel like if it takes you a lot of drugs in order to do well in this sport, it's probably not the sport for you. And if it's not the sport for you, then, maybe you shouldn't be blasted. I mean, because really these drugs, especially for women, they've got lasting side effects. And if you're blasting a lot of drugs, you're really shortening your lifespan. There's a reason why we see these male bodybuilders who use lots of drugs, they die very young. It's not really a surprise. So, and this happens with female bodybuilders as well, where you see female bodybuilders that, they don't live very long, and that there's a reason for that. So making sure that you also, like, if you've got to use a big amount, then maybe you should rethink what you're doing.
Well, and if you're using it from the very beginning, rather than, like you said, incorporating small doses at levels, playing your cards, as you're moving along, by the time, if you've used everything in high doses, by the time you've earned your pro card, now you don't have a hand to play except to use more drugs.
And I think this is why women in this sport, you'll see women who do really good for a couple years on the pro level, and all of a sudden they disappear. They're gone, poof, gone. Nobody hears from them anymore. You don't see them you don't see them like at the shows. You don't see them at all. They just fucking disappear. And so this is kind of like one of the things that prompted me to kind of like look into this more, because it's like, where the fuck did all these women go? Because they literally just, it's like they fall off of the, like, planet bodybuilding earth. Like it's just, they're poof. And it's because they get all fucked up. Like, your body can only manage a lot of drugs for a certain amount of time before things catch up with you. So you see these women who compete at high levels for many years, and then all of a sudden they're gone. There's a reason for that. Like they're royally fucked up. And they're trying to repair themselves. And unfortunately what happens is, after abusing them for long periods of time, you get to a point where you can't even get in shape anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a sad thing that we see. So, just for the women out there, like listening to this, like, you might be able to abuse them for a couple years, but it catches up with you. And if you want longevity in this sport, if you want to be able to do this for a long time, if you want to just look and feel good for a long time, do it the right fucking way and have patience.
Yeah. I think that's the main message to put out there is, like you said, if you do a show, decide if it's something that you really want to do, and then hire somebody who's going to teach you how to eat and train correctly.
Right.
And worry about your health and be concerned about, because it's not a healthy sport, unfortunately. And people, they, a lot of times you get somebody like yourself, like myself, losing a bunch of weight. I'm going to get healthy. I'm going to get more healthy. I'm going to do a bodybuilding competition. Oh, I have to do drugs in order to do well. I was feeling so good about myself, and then I did this competition and I didn't do well, or in order to do well at a higher level, I'm going to have to do drugs. So I just want people to be aware what they're, when you put your toe in the water, what submersion looks like,
Yes. And I really just, I urge women to do their research Like, do your research. I know, like, on my Instagram, I've put out a bunch of free content about this type of stuff. I do a free webinar. I'm going to be doing another free webinar probably sometime in February. So, look out on my Instagram for that. And in that, I really give you really great guidelines for making a decision on whether or not you want to use.
Yeah.
And then I have like an ABC course that I do that kind of like primes you and gives you all the information you need in order to make the decision for yourself. Because ultimately, like, I'm not against anabolics and I'm not pro anabolics. I'm pro knowledge for women because I really truly feel like it's your body. If you want to completely abuse it and kill yourself, that is your right to do that. It's your right to do that. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. But at least be educated in what you're doing to yourself. And if you are a woman that wants to compete and look good and keep your femininity and your health and everything else, like, just make sure that you're getting the information you need in order to make good choices for yourself and for your future. And really, that's my emphasis here is like, make sure, like, figure out what you want for yourself and what you want for your body and for your future. And then make decisions based on that and make sure you're making educated decisions on that. No matter if that's in the doctor's office for your birth control or if that's like with a coach with anabolics, whatever it may be. Don't take your coach's word for it. Don't take your doctor's word for it. Do a little bit of research on your own. There's no reason this day and age. I mean, with women in anabolics, it is a little bit harder to find that information. That's kind of why I started putting out my courses because I felt like it needed to be out there.
Yeah.
But, do your research. There's some stuff out there. And there's more. I know, beyond myself, Victoria Felcar is another great woman to follow. I've gotten a lot of my information from her. She's great. So that's another, if you're interested in finding out more, she's another great resource.
Yeah. I think that, that's just the bottom line is that people need to do their research. And like with anything, people are looking for a quick fix. There's so many, you've got your 6-week programs that people put out there and everything like that. When you see a coach posting transformation photos, just understand that if it doesn't seem realistic, it's not.
Right.
And you can pin your own conclusion to that. Did that person work really, really hard over 6 months or a year and a half? It's very, very possible that they were working very, very hard, but they probably also got some sort of assistance as well. And so I would just urge people to link that to the coach and understand that if you want to look like that, that coach is probably prescribing something other than just training and exercise, and nutrition. So.
Right. And like, make sure if you are with a coach like that, where maybe you are going to consider like doing this crazy transformation, that ask your coach, what's the plan for after?
Yeah.
What's the plan for after? Because unfortunately, what I see with these transformations is the women, you don't hear from them after because they're ruined from that transformation. So they've already put on the 50 pounds that they lost for that transformation and they can't get it back off now.
Well, and contest prep is hard enough as it is when you lean out that you end up putting on weight afterwards anyways. The reverse and everything is very crucial. So now when you start, like I said, I think there's an unrealistic expectation of people think they're going to get ready for a show and hold on to that look too. It's the desire to hold on to that look that I think leads people to do these extreme things and don't consider their health. So.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We're just worried about you.
I really am because, unfortunately, the more I talk about this, the more I get these like stories from women where their health has been ruined, their femininity has been ruined. And everyone's idea of what femininity is different. You've just got to know what's important to you. And that's the important part. And knowing how to conserve that and knowing what things are going to compromise that. So, I just hate to see these women because it's not just your physical health that's affected. It's not just the way you look that's affected. It affects their relationships with people. It affects their jobs. It affects their careers if they're in school. It just has this effect of, trickling down into all areas of their life. So, I know that we think it's very compartmentalized into, it's just my hair or it's just my skin or whatever. But you know, I think especially for women, like think to yourself, okay, like a lot of like women will say to me, oh, I don't care if my voice changes.
Right.
Well, let me ask you, if your child or your mother asks you why your voice has changed, are you going to be okay with having to explain that? What
Yeah.
about if you pick up the telephone at your work and your coworkers or other people that you're a professional with, they start noticing the change in your voice and the change in your body at the same time?
Yeah.
Are you, if they make a comment to you, are you going to know how to deal with it? What about, like, I know for myself, like just being in contest shape and going to the grocery store, I used to have to combat people all the time where they'd be like, is that a man or a woman?
Right.
You know, so here's the thing. Women don't think about that when they are starting anabolics, about how they're going to have to deal with the lashback from everyone else in their life and everyone that they are around in their life. I know when I started anabolics, like my voice dropped. My voice is not what it used to be. And I used to answer phones for, like, you know, I worked for a construction company, and I would have people that they knew I was a woman, but they would call me sir just to be an asshole.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, are you going to be okay? Like, can you handle that? Are you going to be like, you know, so women also ask yourselves, like, if you start having some of these sides that you think you're okay with, think about living your life and having to explain those things to the people closest to you. Are you going to be okay with that?
And sometimes like I said, the exchange is because you want a quick fix. Whereas,
Right.
I don't look like somebody who uses performance enhancing drugs, but I still look like an athlete, so you could put the time in and
Right.
probably get the body that you would like. And
Just not tomorrow.
exactly. So yeah.
Yep. I
So
totally get it. I totally get it.
yeah. Well, Jamie, it was really, really nice having you on. I super appreciate it for your
Oh,
time.
thank you for having me. I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah,
So
I'm sure we'll have you back again because there's so many more things we can talk about. And I think next time I'll probably put a question out so that people can have questions for you and we could do
yeah,
more of a Q&A.
absolutely. I'd love that.
Yeah, I think that would be awesome. So anyways, well, we're just going to say thanks for listening to another episode of the Women's Maximum Fitness podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a written review, tell Jamie you're so thankful that she was here today. And remember that healthy looks different on everybody. So for that, I say, have a great day.